Ladies and gents, my name is Brandon the Dom, and today we're discussing 7 behaviors for a good submissive. Now, first off, this is obviously coming from a perspective of a Dom, and so these are things that I look for in a submissive when we're having our dynamic. And second of all, this is a follow-up video to the video I already did called What is a Good Dom? And I talked about the 7 behaviors for a good Dom, so these are going to be the corollaries to those. Which makes a good dynamic. If you remember in that video, I talked about you and I on the same team. It's not, the Dom versus the submissive. They're building the dynamic together. So as I go over some of these behaviors today, realize that it's in service of the dynamic. The other thing I wanted to mention is that being a submissive is not actually a passive role. There's an art and skill to receiving acts, an art and skill to being the person that is the submissive one in the dynamic. And because of that, submissive actually have to actively participate within the dynamic. And that's why we're discussing these behaviors today. What actions are the submissive going to do in order to make a good dynamic? So let's go ahead and dive in. The first one, very obvious, is service. Specifically service towards the vision. If you remember when we talked in the Dom video, the Dom is creating a vision for where the dynamic is going. They're the captain of the ship, and that makes the submissive the first mate. So if the Dom is creating a vision, then the submissive knows all of the details about that vision in order to bring it to reality. The submissive is there to be of service to the Dom, to make it easier for the Dom to actually bring the vision to reality. So anything that the Dom needs, the submissive is there to serve. And this is really important because the Dom cannot do it on their own. Leaders need followers. So the submissive is just as important as the Dom in this relationship, even though the Dom is the one that holds the power. And the reason that the submissive would be giving over some of this service is because remember, the Dom is taking responsibility. The submissive knows that the Dom has the submissive's interests at heart. So the submissive is there to serve whatever needs of the Dom occur during that time. The second behavior is respect, and this correlates with trust and obedience as the submissive. This is the most important act that the submissive is going to do. Actually trust and respect what the Dom is saying, what the Dom is ordering, where the Dom is leading the dynamic. And yet, this is probably going to be the hardest thing to do as a submissive, is to give your trust to someone else. To basically put the responsibility of you into someone else's hands. And honestly, you can do the best negotiations, the best vetting, the best understanding of that other person. And no matter how much you do, you're still going to have to take a leap of faith and trust in this other person that they have your interests at heart and they're actually going to do what's best for you. Submissives signal to the Dom that they actually trust them by respecting them. They respect the orders that are given. They're obedient and do what they're told, and they treat their Dom with honor and courtesy, even in intense scenes or when they're out and about. And remember, as a submissive, you're not just showing respect to the Dom because they hold the power, but rather because they hold the responsibility. And you're not just following any rules that the Dom set up just because they're rules or because the Dom has power, but you're doing it because you know the Dom set a vision that has your goals and their goals in mind. And any rule that they set in place is to service those goals. It's to help you get there. So if you're following the rules, you should be on your way to reaching the goals that you have. Again, you guys are on the same team. All right, the third one is chaos or challenging the structure, which kind of seems the opposite of what I just said. And in some ways it is, because rules are only good if they're actually serving a purpose. If the rules are actually getting you to where you want to go, to the vision and goals that you guys have set. When the rules are not getting you there, then they need to be challenged in order to bring attention to them to show that these are worthless. They're not getting us to what we want. And this, as a submissive, is when you get permission to actually be a brat and cause some chaos to challenge the structure that your Dom set. And this brings awareness for the Dom to the structure to say, hey, are we actually getting where we want? I don't think this is where I want to go. This is sort of one of your spots of agency as a submissive. Yes, you're not the one setting the rules, but you can challenge those rules in order to make the dynamic better. And personally, as a Dom, I want that feedback. I want to know where I'm messing up or maybe where I'm being too much of a tyrant and losing sight of what you wanted as a submissive, what your goals were. I need to update the vision so that we're both, getting to where we want to be. And this is where I personally allow brattiness in. I don't like just being disrespected for no reason or being challenged to, get some sort of high emotional feeling out of me, but rather because you want to better reach our goals together. The next one is communication. And this was one that was brought up in the video about the Dom. Because communication, again, is the bread and butter of the dynamic. None of this happens unless you two are talking with each other. Now, in the video about the Dom, I talked about how the Dom's responsibility is to create a structure, a container to allow this communication to flow and happen. Sometimes, being the Dom, you don't always have the best communication skills. Maybe you lack an awareness of how to create that container to allow discussion to flow. So as a submissive, it's going to be your job to still stand up for your boundaries, to still stand up for your desires, to still stand up for your goals, even if the Dom has not created a very good structure in order to do so. Because if the submissive doesn't, well, then the Dom may run the dynamic astray and nobody gets to where they want to go. The other important communication part for submissives is that feedback. If the Dom is messing up, you need to let them know that so they can better reorganize the dynamic. However, if the Dom is doing a great job, you also want to express gratitude and show appreciation for that. Personally, I'm a Dom and I still have a praise king too. I want to know that I'm being a good human and that the actions that I'm taking, especially the responsibility that I've taken upon myself for the dynamic, that you're actually enjoying it, that it's actually getting us where we want to go. That's a hell of a lot of fun for you. Give me that feedback. The feedback isn't always words. Sometimes it's body language. It's moans of pleasure. As much as possible, you want to show how much you're enjoying what is happening. Because more likely than not, you're going to get more of that if you show that. However, if you're not communicating what you also enjoy, then the Dom just may move on to something else and you don't get to enjoy that as much. All right, the next important behavior is play, or servicing pleasure. When Doms get all this power over another person, it can become a really heady game. Not only do they get power over somebody that they can tell them to do whatever they want, obviously within boundaries and what you guys have discussed, but they've also taken on responsibility for another person, which can cause anxiety. And all of that is like flowing up in the Dom's head. And they're like, I don't know what I'm going to do with all of this. That's where you, as a submissive, can use pleasure, can use demonstrations of your submissiveness in order to bring the Dom back down to earth, to bring them back into their body, and to bring back their attention to what they're actually being dominant over. Why are they even doing this in the first place? This is another point where submissives have a very active role in the dynamic, where they can actually have a lot of influence over the dominant. So as a submissive, this might be something like demonstrating you're a very sexual being, dressing provocatively, begging for what you want, or playfully initiating sexual acts. It could also be something like using nonverbal cues, like putting yourself into a submissive position without ever being told. Again, bringing attention to the dynamic. Hello, I'm the submissive. That means you're the dominant. And you can start to initiate that play. And for me personally, doing little acts of service without being asked is a wonderful thing. And it will also remind me that there is somebody here to serve me. And that if I want more of that, all I have to do is order that. And really, all of this play, all of this pleasure that you're giving the dominant is a reward to them for taking the responsibility. Remember, they're taking on a large load on their shoulders. So show them why they're doing it. Give them a reward for doing that. You're not the only one that's getting rewarded. The next behavior is learning. So in the Dom video, I talked about how the dominant can sometimes educate their submissive, training them in certain ways, teaching them new skills, new things about themselves. So as a submissive, it helps if you're open to actually learning those things. It helps if you're open to being coached. You want to improve yourself. And so you seek out those resources, you seek out the advice of your dominant, and you push yourself to get better. Sometimes this comes in the form of assignments that your Dom has given you, in which case you should take those seriously and actually do the assignment. Because again, the Dom has taken your goals in mind, so they're giving you something that they think will help you to reach those. And so by you taking it seriously, you may actually reach the goal and you show your dominant some respect. And personally, as a Dom, I am always trying to better myself, especially if I'm going to have the responsibility of not only myself, but another person. And so with my submissives, I expect them to want to grow as well. And when I'm giving an assignment or trying to help them learn something new, I just want them to be open and coachable to that. And just like in the last one, love is our final behavior. And this means for the submissive, serving with intention. As a submissive, you're giving over a gift of submission to another person. And you're not doing it because you were told to. You're doing it because you choose to. You're choosing to serve this person because they're taking on the responsibility for caring for you. And you want to care for them in a way that they're actually going to receive it. There's an intention of love behind it. I think this idea of being on the same team is really what makes these DS dynamics a lot stronger. And when you're building a team, you don't give everybody, equal things that they're doing. You find their strengths and weaknesses. In a DS relationship, we understand that the Dom has better strengths in dealing with the grander vision and setting a direction, and rules and structure for where things are going. And then we understand that the submissive has greater strengths in playing a support role and being there to see the details, giving feedback to the dominant, and helping make sure that everybody's happy within the dynamic. As I mentioned in the last video, these are very lofty ideals to try and hit, but it's what we're aiming for. We're trying to better ourselves every day, and these behaviors are going to help you be a better submissive within a dynamic. So with that, if you haven't already, go watch the Dom video. You can see the corollaries of these behaviors. And if you have any questions about dominance, submission, kink, tantra, sex, relationships, anything like that, you can actually go to my website, brandonthedom.com, and go to the articles tab or scroll down on the homepage and you'll see a box for free advice. And you can just type your question in there and I will either write an article for it, create a video, or just send you an email with an answer. So happy to answer any questions you guys have around this. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I'll see you in the next video.